What does it truly mean for a woman to live alone, not in spite of society, but in deep communion with herself? In a world that still measures a woman's worth by her relationships, why are more women choosing solitude? And what if this path isn't about rejecting love, but reclaiming something far more sacred? Today, more women than ever are choosing to live alone, not as a temporary pause, but as a deliberate act of self-discovery. Society calls them lonely, rebellious, or even incomplete. But Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, saw something deeper, a woman's solitude as a crucible for transformation. Beneath the surface of this choice lies a confrontation with the animus, her inner masculine, the integration of her shadow, and the ultimate journey toward individuation, becoming whole, with or without a partner. This isn't just about living alone. It's about the truth so many women quietly live, that solitude can be the very thing that sets them free. For centuries, a woman's identity was inextricably tied to her roles as wife, mother, or caretaker. Her value was measured by her ability to nurture, obey, and sustain the family structure. Independence was not just discouraged, it was often seen as a threat. A woman alone was either pitied or suspected, her solitude interpreted as failure rather than choice. But today, something profound has shifted. More women are opting out of traditional paths, not out of bitterness, but because they've glimpsed a startling truth, that fulfillment does not have to come through another person. This cultural shift forces us to ask, what changed? Economic freedom, education, and the slow dismantling of patriarchal structures have given women options their grandmothers never had. Yet, beneath the practical reasons lies a deeper, psychological evolution. Carl Jung would argue that this movement toward independence isn't just social, it's archetypal. A woman living alone is not rejecting men. She is confronting the animus, the unconscious masculine energy within her. Jung believed that every woman carries an inner masculine aspect, the animus, which shapes her intellect, assertiveness, and relationship with power. When a woman depends entirely on a man for security or validation, her animus remains dormant, even oppressive. But solitude forces her to awaken it. She must now embody the qualities she once sought in a partner: decisiveness, self-reliance, and inner authority. The difference is critical. This isn't about needing a man, but about integrating the masculine within herself. This integration is rarely smooth. Society still whispers that a woman alone is incomplete, that her independence is a phase rather than a legitimate way of being. But Jung's framework reveals the opposite. A woman who consciously relates to her animus, rather than projecting it onto a partner, steps into a more authentic version of herself. She no longer seeks a man to fill a void, but engages with masculinity, both within and without, from a place of wholeness. The question then becomes not, why is she alone, but what is she becoming? At the heart of Jungian psychology lies the concept of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are, beyond societal conditioning and unconscious patterns. For a woman living alone, solitude becomes the alchemical container for this transformation. Without the constant presence of others to reflect back an identity, she is forced to confront the most fundamental question: who am I when no one is watching? In this space, the distractions fade, and the journey inward begins. But this path is not without its perils. Jung warned that solitude could be a double-edged sword. It could either foster profound self-discovery or become a retreat from the necessary tensions of human connection. The key difference lies in choice. A woman who isolates out of fear or unresolved trauma may stagnate in her growth, reinforcing defenses rather than dissolving them. But when solitude is consciously chosen, it becomes a crucible for empowerment. She learns to rely on her own voice, to validate her own existence, and to cultivate a relationship with herself that no external bond can replace. This is where shadow work becomes unavoidable. The shadow, as Jung defined it, is the part of our psyche that we reject, deny, or hide, often because it contradicts our self-image or societal expectations. For a woman living alone, the shadow may manifest in unexpected ways. The fear of loneliness might surface, not as a quiet companion, but as a paralyzing dread. Societal judgments, "You'll end up a cat lady," "You're too picky," "You're selfish," may echo in her mind, revealing internalized shame. Even her independence can become a shadow if she over-identifies with it, using it as armor against vulnerability or intimacy. Yet, it is precisely in facing these shadows that her greatest growth occurs. When she acknowledges her fear of loneliness without letting it dictate her choices, she reclaims her power. When she stops internalizing societal judgments, she begins to define her own worth. And when she balances independence with openness, she avoids the trap of spiritual bypassing, using solitude to transcend human needs rather than to integrate them. This is the paradox at the heart of Jung's teachings. True wholeness comes not from rejecting any part of ourselves, but from bringing light to the darkest corners of our psyche. In this way, living alone becomes more than a lifestyle. It becomes an initiatory journey. The woman who walks this path does not emerge perfect or self-sufficient in the way society glorifies. Instead, she becomes something far more compelling, authentic. She no longer flees from her shadows, nor does she let them rule her. She learns to hold the tension between solitude and connection, independence and vulnerability, until she discovers the deepest truth of all, that she is already complete. One of the most persistent myths about women who live alone is the assumption that they must be lonely, as if solitude were synonymous with emptiness. But loneliness and aloneness are not the same. Loneliness stems from a sense of disconnection, while aloneness can be a deliberate space of communion with oneself. Jung would argue that a woman who embraces solitude isn't lacking connection, she's redefining it. She may feel lonely at times, but she also discovers a profound capacity to be at home within herself, a skill that many who cling to relationships out of fear never develop. Another common misconception is that a woman living alone is somehow rejecting her femininity, as if the essence of being a woman depends on her attachment to others. But Jung's work dismantles this idea entirely. True femininity, in the Jungian sense, isn't about external roles or relationships. It's an inner force, a way of being that encompasses receptivity, intuition, creativity, and strength. A woman alone isn't denying her femininity. She's often deepening it, free from the projections and expectations that once confined her. Yet, despite these truths, real struggles persist. Societal pressure can be relentless, manifesting in subtle judgments or outright pity. Well-meaning relatives ask, "When will you settle down?" as if a woman's life only begins with partnership. The unloved woman stereotype lingers in cultural narratives, painting solo women as tragic figures rather than autonomous individuals making conscious choices. Worse still, some women internalize these messages, questioning whether their independence is a flaw rather than a strength. This is where the distinction between healthy solitude and isolation becomes critical. Healthy solitude is a choice, a dynamic state where a woman engages with herself and the world on her own terms. Isolation, on the other hand, is often a retreat from life, a defensive posture against unresolved pain. Jung emphasized that the goal of psychological growth isn't to escape human connection but to engage with it from a place of wholeness. A woman who isolates may be avoiding her shadows, while a woman who chooses solitude may be facing them head-on. The challenge, then, isn't just about enduring societal myths. It's about discerning the difference between solitude as empowerment and solitude as avoidance. A woman living alone must constantly navigate this tension, asking herself, "Am I here because I'm running from something, or because I'm running toward myself?" The answer to that question determines whether her aloneness becomes a prison or a portal to deeper self-knowledge, unshakable authenticity, and ultimately, a life lived on her own terms. Jung's exploration of feminine archetypes reveals a profound truth. The journey of solitude has always been an initiatory path to wisdom. The Great Mother archetype traditionally represents nurturing and fertility, but her shadow aspect holds the deeper lesson, the ability to nourish oneself. When a woman lives alone, she doesn't abandon this archetype. she transforms it, becoming both the mother and the child in her own story. Similarly, the wise woman archetype emerges not through relationships, but through the alchemical process of turning solitude into self-knowledge. This is the sacred paradox. In stepping away from traditional feminine roles, a woman often discovers their truest essence. Mythology and psychology converge in showing us that self-sufficiency has always been a spiritual path. Ancient cultures revered the solitary feminine, from the virgin goddess Artemis who roamed wild and free, to the oracle at Delphi whose wisdom came through chosen isolation. These archetypes remind us that what society often frames as loneliness has historically been recognized as sacred space, the fertile void where transformation occurs. Jung saw this process as essential to individuation, where withdrawing from external definitions allows the authentic self to emerge. The modern woman walking this path participates in an ancient tradition of feminine power reclaimed. History offers striking examples of women who turned solitude into strength. Take Artemis, the Greek goddess who rejected marriage to roam the wilderness. Her independence wasn't deprivation but devotion to her true nature. Or consider Virginia Woolf, whose essay, A Room of One's Own, articulated what Jung would call the psychological necessity of space for creative feminine energy. These women didn't just live alone. They used solitude as a crucible for genius and self-realization. Even mythical figures like the Baba Yaga, the feared but wise crone of Slavic folklore, reveal how society both fears and needs the woman who stands apart. Contemporary voices continue this legacy. Modern women report profound discoveries in their solo journeys. The artist who finds her voice only after years of quiet, the executive who learns to trust her intuition without constant consultation, the healer who discovers her gifts in the stillness. Their stories echo Jung's insistence that some truths can only be found alone. One woman describes her solo years as the time I stopped performing womanhood and started experiencing it. Another reflects, in the silence, I met parts of myself I didn't know I'd abandoned. These testimonials reveal a universal truth, that the woman who dares to be alone often finds she was never truly solitary, but in deep communion with her whole self. This section of the journey culminates in a radical reframing. What if living alone isn't about lack, but about profound connection to the feminine divine within? The woman who walks this path follows in the footsteps of priestesses, mystics, and creators throughout time. Her solitude becomes not an empty space, but a sacred one, where the whispers of her deepest wisdom can finally be heard. In Jungian terms, she achieves what many seek but few find, not just independence, but true individuation, the homecoming to all that she is. As we've seen through Jung's lens, a woman's choice to live alone is far more than a lifestyle preference. It's a profound psychological and spiritual journey. Solitude becomes the mirror that reflects her unlived parts, the animus she must integrate, the shadow she must face, and the societal myths she must dismantle to reclaim her wholeness. This path isn't about rejecting relationships, but about forging a deeper one, with herself. In doing so, she participates in an ancient archetype of feminine wisdom, joining the ranks of women and mythic figures who turn solitude into sovereignty. The truth is simple yet radical. Living alone isn't about rejecting men. It's about embracing the full self. It's a declaration that a woman's completeness isn't contingent on another, but on her willingness to meet all parts of herself, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability. And in that meeting, she discovers something extraordinary, that the love, validation, and belonging she once sought externally were always within her grasp. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What's your take? Is solitude a path to wholeness, or does society still frame it as a taboo? Have you experienced the transformative power of time alone, or do you see it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's unravel these questions together. And if Jung's insights resonated with you, dive deeper into his works like The Portable Jung or Ion, where these ideas unfold in even greater richness. Remember, whether you live alone or not, the invitation stands. to stop fearing solitude and start listening to what it has to teach you. Because in the quiet, you might just meet the most important person in your life, your truest self. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content that bridges psychology, myth, and the inner journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and above all, keep becoming.